No apologies, no explanation. Virginia congressional candidate Krystal Ball is fighting mad over a series of risque photos of her after a series of risque photos of her emerged on the internet. It was last week when a conservative blog posted the photos taken 6 years ago, including images of Ms. Ball with her ex-husband, who had a sex toy attached to his nose. But she is not shying away from those photos. In fact, she's using them as an example of what she perceives is a cruel double standard in politics. Krystal Ball joins me now. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
So, as I said, you believe this is part of a larger tactic that's used against female politicians. What is this trend that you see?
I do. Well, this is interesting because certainly the tactic of painting female politicians as whores and as sluts is nothing new, and painting successful women in general in this way in order to delegitimize them and to denigrate them is nothing new. It's a new twist on it, though, because obviously now, as I'm one of the first of my generation in the Facebook age to step up and run for office, I'm sort of the first one to have this particular thing happen to me, but I certainly don't think I'll be the last.
In your article in the Huffington Post, you write, I'm going to quote you here, "Society has to accept that women of my generation have sexual lives that are going to leak into the public sphere. Sooner or later, this is a reality that has to be faced, or many young women in my generation will not be able to run for office." I want to ask you honestly, when these first came out, did you say to yourself, you know what, I'm just going to get out, I'm going to just go hide, and politics isn't for me?
I never considered getting out of the race, but when they first came out, there's no question I was tremendously embarrassed. I was humiliated. I did want to hide in a corner, but I looked to my own mother and to Hillary Clinton as examples of women of strength and courage who really stood up for themselves. And
in fact, you've mentioned Hillary Clinton. Where do you see the parallel?
Well, I am in no means comparing myself to Hillary Clinton. That is definitely not the case. But I think she has carried herself with such strength and integrity throughout her career, even when things were very difficult, even when things came to light that were embarrassing for her family and that were very private and personal. She really came out and was strong and composed. And I thought, you know what? We can't allow these kinds of tactics to scare good people from running for office. I think that we need more young people and more young women to stand up and run for office, and I don't want them to be deterred by some silly party pictures or something that they did stupid in front of a camera years and years ago. So I decided for, not just for myself, but for young women to come out and address this head on, because I don't want this to deter people who want to serve our country from stepping up and running for office.
Virginia candidate for Congress, Krystal Ball, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Chris, for having me.
And our company is back. Karen, Matt, and Howard. And Howard, I'm going to start with you because you did work with Hillary so closely as her communications director. Do you see that sort of parallel that she draws?
Well, certainly Hillary Clinton was a victim of sexism at times during the campaign, and there are people who opposed her because she was a woman, and that is a challenge that female candidates face whether they're running for Congress or president. On the other hand, I don't really remember pictures like this of Hillary Clinton. I think she was probably more likely to be baking Christmas cookies than posing in those kinds of Christmas outfits. You know, the candidate points out an interesting conundrum, which is in the Facebook era, as more and more of our lives are digitized, are you going to be seeing more and more of this? Are we going to be seeing everybody with a digital past making it more difficult for them to run for office? To me, it just points out the importance of telling young people that any picture you take at any time can show up online 5 or 6 years later, and you need to be a little bit more careful.
But you know, Howard, it does bring up she brings up an important point in terms of the narrative that is so much developed about the woman candidate, you know, either whores or sluts, or, you know, you're cold or you're this or you're that. I mean, I remember working for Hillary in the White House. A magazine wouldn't run beautiful pictures of her on the cover of their magazine because it didn't fit the actual narrative they wanted to tell of the Lady Macbeth. So women definitely have to walk a fine line between being tough but being smart but not being overly emotional. And you know, if these pictures were of a man, he'd be the Mac Daddy.
Let me speak to that specifically.
Hang on there.
Okay, go ahead.
If you had a picture of comparable pictures of Jim DeMent with a woman on a leash and a sex toy on his nose, I can guarantee you Jonathan Capehart will be talking about judgment.
Okay. All right. Well, let me show you this. I don't know if we're using these pictures, but do you remember when Scott Brown, the picture? Oh, there he is. Cosmo centerfold winner. He was 22, surfaced when he was running for Senate. You know, Matt, he has said he thinks this helped his campaign.
But it did get I don't think they're analogous. I mean, first of all, what Krystal Ball, the pictures of her were 6 years ago. I think the pictures of Scott Brown were probably like 30 years ago or something. Also, I think it's not comparable. I mean, he was certainly posing for a magazine.
He's naked.
And Matt, why there is a double standard here that something like that is more acceptable if it's a man. Again, he'd be the Mac Daddy, the cool guy, and a woman somehow you're a slut.
Yeah, but hold on. He did get.
Let's not compare apples to oranges here.
Right?
If there were pictures of a Republican, let's say Jim DeMent, holding a woman on a leash, like Krystal, Ball was pictured doing, with a sex toy on his nose, I can guarantee you.
They were both 22 years old when these pictures were taken. They were both, I don't know, college or just right after.
And it was
let me bring up another point, though.
If he was 22 years old with his girlfriend doing it and it was consensual, I don't think it would be such a big... I'm just saying, it's not like he's got somebody on a leash.
The notion that everything can be casually dismissed as sexism. You can't say that Christine O'Donnell's not qualified because you're a sexist. You can't say that those pictures are inappropriate because you're a sexist.
She's got other problems.
I'm just saying, I think that it's playing the victim card, and this is a legitimate issue, and for her to dismiss it and to try to use sexism as a shield.
So where does this bring us, though? All right, even if we agree with your point, and I can't say that everybody does, but even if we agree with your point, where does that lead us going forward? What does that mean? Because to Howard's point, Matt, we have such a digital record now that we didn't have before. I defy anyone to say there's absolutely nothing in my past that they prefer to keep in my past that no one should ever know about.
Karen said
and
that.
And at what point? But I'm asking a serious question.
Oh, well, let me give you my answer. I think, first of all, whether you're going to dress up like a Nazi and reenact things, or whether you're going to be pictured again with your ex-husband on a leash with a sex toy on your nose, you have to expect that that's going to reflect on your judgment. Now, I do think that the public is going to make a judgment here. Has enough time expired? Was this just someone having fun? Is this serious? Does this actually reflect a lack of judgment? And we're going to see a lot more of this. But look, I think it's fair game, and I don't think you can dismiss it by saying it's sexism. It's a legitimate issue.
So, Matt, when David Letterman said that Sarah Palin was dressing like a stewardess, which a lot of us thought was really sexist, was that sexist or that was okay? That was an okay way to talk about a woman's form.
I'm not saying that sexism does not exist.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, let me give you a classic example. So who gets to decide when it is or when it isn't?
You do?
There has to be a definition. Look, when Karl Rove was critical of Christine O'Donnell, that was not sexism. He was accused of misogyny. I think that you have a right to be a legitimate political analyst and to say that somebody erred in judgment. You cannot simply, if you're a female candidate, say, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, by the way, say that any attack on you is illegitimate because it's sexist.
All right, we have to let it stand at that. Isn't it nice, Matt, to get the last word? But it's an important conversation, and I think especially looking forward, we need to figure out exactly how this all is going to impact things, and is it going to make a difference in who represents us in Congress and elsewhere. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Howard. I think that was a great conversation.